You can go ahead, Tosin.
Okay. Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for making the time to join this Africa Proptech Foundation webinar. My name is Tosin Ajose, and it's my privilege to be the moderator of this session this afternoon. I am the lead advisor of Deal HQ Partners. Deal HQ is a boutique transactional advisory firm out of Lagos, Nigeria, and I am also privileged to be an advisory board member of the Africa Proptech Forum. This webinar is put together by the Africa Proptech Forum, so it is my honor to welcome every one of you to this session. We will be spending the next 60 minutes together having conversations around the adoption of technology in Africa building and construction. Let me start the session by saying a very huge thank you to all our partners who have made this webinar possible. Thank you, Proptech Africa, MEST, Python Housing, Proptech Kenya, SA Proptech, and CESO Global. We acknowledge that without your contribution and your partnership, we would not have been able to put this together. So thank you. Just before I make a head start, I'm sure that as many of you as operate within the build sector of the Africa construction sector, you would know that technology has become, a bedrock of progress and innovation across, all the diverse sectors that there are of Africa's economy. So this is a timely conversation where we intend to talk about the growth of technology solutions and innovative applications in the construction sector and how they have created significant opportunity to push development, reduce costs, and achieve time efficiency on project delivery. And so I have an amazing faculty that will be joining me on the conversation today. Each of them in their own right are thought leaders in this area, and it is indeed a huge pleasure for us to have them on this webinar today. I'd start with the CEO of Echo Concrete, Apollo Ureyega. Thank you so very much, Apollo, for making the time to be here with us. Apollo, if you're on, please put on your video so that we can see you. Okay, I'm sure Apollo will join us in the course of the session. I am also very privileged to have in conversation with me today the Managing Director of 14 Trees Limited, Francois Perrot. Francois, it is a pleasure to have you today. Thank you very much for making the time to be with us. And finally, but definitely not the least, I have Emmanuel Stefanakis. Emmanuel is the Chief Sustainability and Production Development Officer at Ecostone. Emmanuel, thank you for making the time to be with us today. Emmanuel, please turn on your video so that we can see you.
Emmanuel's just connecting Tosin. He'll be in shortly.
Okay, right. So while we're waiting for Emmanuel and Apollo to log on and join the conversations, again, I'd like to welcome all our participants. Please remember that the live chats function is now on and working. Please put in your questions in the live chats and notes if you are directing to any of our specific attendees. We will make sure to take as many questions as we can accommodate within the 60 minutes that we have for this session. And you can also, send your comments on any of the conversation points as you hear them. And I'm sure that if there is need to respond, any one of my panelists will be happy to ensure that, they address those concerns. We will try to keep the conversation as engaging and as interesting as possible. And so while we're waiting for for Emmanuel and Apollo to join, I will just allow Francois to start his presentation. He has a short presentation where he'll be taking us through some of the current technology and innovation trends in Africa's build sector from his own perspective. So please feel free to run your presentation, Francois. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Could you just confirm that you hear me correctly so that I proceed with my presentation? Yes. Excellent, thanks.
We can hear you.
Excellent. So good afternoon, pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I would like to give you a quick overview of the activities we are undertaking as 14 Trees. First of all, who we are. 14 Trees is a joint venture between Lafarge Holcim. You may know us for the cement, the aggregates, and the concrete we commercialize in many African countries. And CDC is our co-partner in that joint venture. It's the British impact investor, quite famous as well. And we've been formed about five years ago to really focus on one specific issue, which is the fact that there are many good technologies in our research labs, but those technologies remain too long in the labs and are not present on the markets where they should be adopted so that they can have an impact on maybe the affordability of those buildings or the environmental footprint of those buildings. So when we created that company 5 years ago, we focused on one country and one technology. The country was Malawi, a very interesting country for at least one reason, many reasons, but at least one. It's a country which is facing a huge deforestation. And one way to avoid deforesting is to stop using woods to burn bricks. So what we decided then was to focus on introducing a green brick technology, which doesn't require any firing, which is something we call DuraBrick. It's a mix of soil and cement. To be honest, that technology has been existing for years. What was not happening is having someone to take it to scale, and which is what we've been doing. We've opened plants like the one you see here. We have 2 plants now producing those bricks in Malawi. That helps to produce these type of houses. Another house that, because we're also contractors, so we go up to the delivery of the houses when it's needed. But we try to take that technology up to the rural areas, and this is why we invented this kind of containerized plants where we produce the bricks right in the middle of the village where people need them and the NGOs building need them. But we did not stop there. We decided last year to introduce something totally disruptive, because what we realized is that even if you take our bricks to the largest scale possible in Malawi, that will never be enough to have an impact on the number of buildings that have to be built in Malawi on a yearly basis to clear the housing and the school backlog. So what we decided to do is to introduce construction 3D printing, which is using a robot, putting layer of concrete on top of each other to be able to build houses very fast. So we are very proud to have been the first company to introduce construction 3D printing in Africa. We delivered a house that you see here, which is a 3D printed house we built in Lilongwe, the capital city of Malawi, in less than 12 hours. So we printed the walls in less than 12 hours. Of course, there is work before and after, but that's a house we believe we can build and sell for less than $10,000 when we have the volume to be able to reach scale. And it's something also that emits much less CO2. We did a thorough life cycle assessment, and that house emits 70% less CO2 than the conventional burn brick house, which is how people build in Malawi. Now we are also venturing into schools, and we have the first school, which is now being handed over to the community, which is the first 3D printed school in the world, and we hope to contribute our share to the to clearing the backlog of schools in Malawi. They need more than 40,000 schools in Malawi, and we believe that technology can really speed up the construction of those schools while reducing also the cost of construction. I will stop here because I have many slides too that I could talk about, but that just as a presentation, that's what we do in Malawi. We now have offices in Kenya. We're also looking at Western Africa, and we've projects in different countries, and that's the team I'm very proud to lead, based in Africa to deliver those houses and schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Francois. Thank you. It's so amazing to hear the work that you're doing in Malawi, and that you're now also in Kenya. I hope that you will very soon, make your way to other countries across, different other aspects of different other areas in Africa, especially the West. So Emmanuel, absolutely Nigeria. Emmanuel, thank you for joining us. And
My pleasure.
Francois has just taken us through some of the technology and innovation work that is happening in Lafarge-Holcim. And I know that you do have slides that you want to present as well to tell us about some of the technology and innovation trends that you have been involved in across Africa. So please go ahead and share with us some of those things. Thank you.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this very, very important webinar. This is a subject which is very close to our heart, and our entire mission, the origins of EchoStone, are based on meeting the challenges of Africa. And the question is, what are they? There are many, but ultimately we focused on technological solutions. Most of construction was rooted in the past, a brick at a time, or using inefficient systems. And we tried to create a paradigm shift in finding new technologies and using old technologies in a new way. The second thing we focused on to meet these challenges was the missing link in putting together a system that combines industrialization of technology with labor to standardize scale production. And as we know, with a $500 billion home deficit, plus or minus, around the world, it's very important that we come up with solutions that can mass produce homes to meet this challenge. And then the third thing that we've found as to meet a challenge is the methodology, incorporating sustainable development principles that not only satisfy the financial and economic issues, but also environmental and social. Next slide, please. Oh, okay, thank you. So the fundamental technology that we are focused on is this very innovative machine that produces concrete in situ. It's portable. It's about the size of a large SUV. It produces concrete that is computerized. The mixing of it is computer controlled. It has enormous flexibility. It can be taken to remote areas where there is no concrete. It can be used in urban areas where traffic is a limitation to delivering large cement trucks. The second part of this is the modularized formwork system, which is very, very efficient, developed in Germany, made out of a recyclable plastic. It can be used hundreds and hundreds of times. It's very lightweight. It doesn't require heavy machinery to erect or take apart, and it facilitates the production of what we use, and that's a cellular lightweight concrete. It's a concrete which has a lower carbon footprint, but it also has far superior qualities. For example, it has very high insulative properties. It's hydrophobic. It dries very quickly, and it's perfect for the application of affordable housing, particularly in the single and two-story niche of the affordable market. So, scale. We have a very strong construction management program, which moves the formwork and the labor throughout the site to produce significant volumes of concrete. We can produce a shell of a single family home, let's say roughly 40 to 60 square meters, in almost 24 hours. And this machine that we produce, you see here, the yellow machine, the Lamborghini of concrete machines, if you will, produces the same amount as 5 large cement trucks every hour. In terms of sustainability, Ecostone is a global EDGE champion. We are very honored to be designated at that from about 3 years ago when we first started our pilot programs in Panama and then Nigeria. We are in constant improving by tweaking architectural designs through community planning, the context of the homes, and through green building methods to achieve the first EDGE advanced housing project any project of its type in Nigeria, and the third EDGE advanced project in all of Africa. We are committed as a company to reaching the EDGE advanced levels of certification on all our projects. And sometimes I'd like to emphasize that this is not terribly hard to do. It's a matter of thought process that go into it, the designs. Here's our Nigeria project. It was a pilot project, 252 homes. It achieved 53% energy savings, 42% water savings, and about 35% less carbon, embodied carbon. And later in the presentation, I'll get into how and why that embodied carbon is as low as it is. We would like to achieve more. But I would like to say, just by using our proprietary machine, that machine alone produces concrete at about 40% reduction in carbon footprint. The same concrete that is used in other places. And this is our Panama project. The first phase, total phase 1 and 2 will be about 400 units. Again, this was phase 1, 32% energy savings, but phase 2 will be well over 50%. So thank you for the introduction, for allowing me to present this, and I look forward to an active interchange with the panelists. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Manuel. Thank you for that very interesting rollout of the work that you are doing in Ecostone and how it is helping achieve sustainability. It's funny to think that, one of the things I took out of there is it looks like you and Francois are competition to each other, because you would seem to be, focused on similar line of business. I'm hearing a lot of, things around concrete and concrete production. So is he your competition?
Not at all. We have a tremendous amount of respect for Lafarge.
Absolutely.
And, give the same answer. There's room for everyone, and if we succeed, I'm more than happy, and we will succeed together.
Yes, we should collaborate more closely, Francois.
Lost voice.
So you're going to be bombarded by the time the session is over. Apollo, thank you so much for joining us. So please let's have your contribution to the current technology and innovation trends that you are seeing in the African market. I'd really love to hear, what your experience has been like in the market. What kinds of things are you seeing, and how is it impacting the quality of life and economy on the continent?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tosin. Of course, the global consensus is that Africa has the highest deficit of infrastructure, which implies that then construction is going to be taking place. New buildings, new bridges, new infrastructure, kind of infrastructure is going to be taking place on the African continent more than anywhere else in the world. When you look at Europe and other developed countries, of course, for them, they seem to have exhausted the space for new infrastructure. They are more into renovation and maintenance and refurbishment of the already existing infrastructure. And therefore, of course, that brings a new opportunity that we correct the mistakes Europeans did when they are developing the infrastructure. At the same time, this opportunity comes when we have advanced tremendously in technology. We are now in Industry 4.0, and this is happening at a stage when Africa needs to be doing a lot of construction. And of course, the second consensus is that sustainability is now a master. We are talking about sustainable construction, and to achieve sustainable construction, definitely you're going to look at commerce, you're going to look at affordability, you're going to look at accountability, you're going to look at measuring achievements, measuring progress, measuring construction, productivity, and also you're going to see how your infrastructure you're putting on the market adapts to changing needs and demands of Africans who are constantly changing in lifestyle as they of course become wealthy. And like I said, all these challenges are coming at an opportunity when we have an explosion in technology. Now, of course, the catch here is Europe has its own challenges. Europe has a market that whose innovation is controlled by a reduction in labor. When you look at Germany, a bag of cement is 3 euros. But in Uganda here, a bag of cement is 12 euros. But labor to consume a bag of cement in Germany, it would be 50 euros. In Africa here, labor is the cheapest. And therefore, when you adopt European technologies and bring them to Africa, the challenge is going to be how do I bring in this technology and still remain competitive, still produce infrastructure that is affordable for Africans. And of course, Africa has an opportunity with this new technology that we are not highly regulated like in Europe. So that's an opportunity that you can innovate, start applying your technology and test it within a market that will support accelerated application of these new technologies, which I look at and consider as an opportunity, which is not possible in Europe. But also Africa has a gap where in most cases we are developing new standards. And standards control technology in subtle ways, which probably in the course of this presentation we'll discuss, that we have a gap where we can look into standards, adapt standards to African commerce, and make sure that we output good technology, and also that the challenges of labor, which Europe tries to run away and adopt this technology to achieve good quality. The challenges of labor meet an opportunity of the fourth industrial revolution, the process of digitization of construction, which in turn would actually allow us to include African labor on the within the construction industry. So as EcoConcrete, we are into concrete construction. We believe that, yes, we won't avoid construction using concrete. We believe that for us to meet the gap in infrastructure, we'll have to apply concrete. But then there are safer ways, there are more sustainable ways, there are cheaper ways of applying this concrete. So we are looking at geopolymer, we're into research, we've partnered with EU. European Union is one of our partners. We also have partnered with UNDP. UNDP is financing parts of our business, which is development of digital assets. We are trying to digitize the process of construction, sort of create building information management systems that are adapted to African construction processes. If you have practiced construction in Africa, the approaches are different. We have more of owner builders. We want to meet those who want to bridge the gap of knowledge, applying digital tools. And then
Apollo, I'm going to have to ask you to kindly wrap up in about 10 seconds so that we can move on to another question.
Okay, so
please, please wrap up in 10 seconds.
Yeah, so we're into digital tools development for construction. We are also practicing construction and also production of geopolymer cements and sustainable construction materials. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to jump right at something you said, Apollo, and you were talking about us trying to adopt European technology in Africa and the implication that that has for eventual costs and even understanding the technology and tailoring it to our own local use here. So I'm going to, on the back of that, ask Emmanuel. Emmanuel, you are from the academics. You do a lot of work in the academics. So I'm going to be asking you, why are we not seeing a lot of homegrown technology coming out of Africa? How do we entrench research and development to bring Africa at par with other countries such as China and the United States and even India, who seem to be topping the charts in construction and engineering innovation? What can we do to ensure that we're doing more in terms of research and development in Africa and that we are able to have our own homegrown technology that is cost effective and tailored to meet our own needs?
That's a huge question that you're posing. And
I know you're more than capable. I'm sure you're more than capable.
Let me start by pointing out a few things. I think some of it, we don't have time to address the larger economic issues and government policy issues, which would encourage local research and development and production facilitation. It seems like the trend in the last few decades has been to shut down a lot of production that was there traditionally and focus more on importation, unfortunately. But that's a very large topic. I think one of the things that we can address is architectural design and engineering. Some of the projects that we've done, for example, there were some cultural barriers to using concrete roof. Or some hesitance to do that. When it was a traditional material applied to roof technologies, instead we were encouraged, I won't say forced, encouraged to use an imported material from China, aluminum, sheet metal roof. So one thing is architectural design, the tweaking of that design to accommodate local materials. As Francois pointed out, the use of soil with cement is a traditional material, and we should be moving more towards those and away from importing materials. The issue is really infrastructure as well. For example, applying sustainable development principles to infrastructure. There's been a predominance, and this is probably one of the worst examples of importing Western or industrialized country technologies to Africa. If you look at traditional ways to construct infrastructure in Africa, it depended a lot more on the ecological systems and far less on engineered controls. For example, the management of stormwater and how curbs and drainage ditches and the destruction of wetlands have have yielded to Western and European methods and standards. I've been involved with projects in all over the world. I've worked in about 50 countries, and some of my some of the better examples of my projects are where we reduce the dependence on concrete and engineered solutions and actually save the project money while increasing ecological performance and infrastructure by using natural systems. And that's a very important factor, which is often forgotten in the development of communities and housing developments. So there's no simple answer to your question. I regret that I can't dive more deeply into it. However, there is fundamentally the issue of integrating more indigenous materials and traditional design and planning technologies.
Thank you. I like what you said about the fact that Africa was predominantly moving towards more ecological solutions, and we seem to have accepted the fact that maybe some of our own indigenous technology is actually substandard, and perhaps that's why we are where we are. But I think we need to have, consistent and continued conversations around bringing back some of these things and trying to entrench systems and processes that would allow them, to be adopted more mainstream in our construction and development. Thank you. So I'm going to come back to you, Francois. And I know that you do a lot of work in affordable housing. This is one of the areas where African governments have had not too pleasant scorecards in terms of, being able to meet the need. You alluded to the fact that Africa has the highest number of housing deficits across the world. So, just wondering, what are we not doing right? How can we use technology to scale social housing? How can we use innovation to scale social housing? Both you and Emmanuel have talked about some of the projects you're doing. You've talked about using 3D technology to build a house in 12 hours and within the $10,000 range. Why is this not? I would expect that this would be the kind of technology that, scales across Africa within, a very short time space. What is happening? There is a huge need. There is, some measure of technology and innovation that can solve this problem. Why are we not scaling? Why are we not scaling?
Yeah, I think it's a very important question you're asking. There is a huge need, but there is a limited demand. Let's be honest with that. And the difference comes from the financing aspect. When you look at mortgages, which is the flow of money you're bringing to the construction market, that's how it works, right? In Nigeria, it represents less than 1% of the GDP. In a country like the US, it's more than 80 or even sometimes more than 100% of the GDP value. So you can imagine that changes drastically the size of the construction market and then the capacity to use technologies. Because let's be honest today, technologies, even if they reduce construction costs and they remain acceptable for the people like them and so on, even if, let's say, they reduce construction costs by 20%, you make houses more affordable by 20%. But then if your mortgage rate is 18, like in Kenya, it's 20 plus, like in Malawi or many other countries. That means that every 4 years you repay your house fully. So even if you're cheap at the beginning, then at the end, it's extremely expensive. So the two will have to work hand in hand. Technologies will develop only if the market grows. And for that market to grow, we need to unleash the mortgage markets. And that's what really we need to do to see a very scalable model happening.
So let me just ask a follow-on question, and perhaps I can extend this question to Apollo. With what technology is doing across different sectors, especially the fintech space, isn't it able to create a platform to democratize financing for housing, especially affordable housing? And if there is the capacity to do that, why are we still having, these kinds of conversations? Why isn't that sector able to open? A lot of people will talk about government policy, But with technology, we know that we are able to override many challenges that are, driven by government policy and maybe regulations. Why do you think that technology in the financial services space has not broken this challenge that we have with mortgages? I'll let you go, and then maybe Apollo can just put in a few words. Please go ahead. Francois, please go ahead, and then Apollo can put in a few words after you.
No, maybe he didn't. He hasn't. He didn't get the question.
Okay, so Apollo, please go ahead. Apollo, please go ahead.
Yeah. So my experience is that financing has never been the problem. The problem is the cost of development of infrastructure. If you're going to finance something, it must make business sense. And if we are going to apply technology in construction and housing, then we need to look at how can technology actually be applied to reduce the cost of construction and make it more financially feasible. I think the first stage is the business stage, which looks at the process of construction. Can technology make the process of construction efficient? The first example I gave between the cost of materials and the cost of labor comparing Europe and Africa is a very good example that while in Europe, the biggest budget in construction goes to labor. In Africa, the biggest budget in construction goes to materials. And what are these materials? These materials are natural materials. A rock of limestone is cheaper in Africa than in Europe. Why should a bag of cement be more expensive in Africa compared to Europe? I think mostly because of the process management. If we can leave the material aside, and we look at the process and understand how this process increases costs and apply technology to manage this process, then we will be significantly reducing the cost of construction. If we can also look at materials and see how to adapt to innovate around materials, then would be able to reduce the construction of cost. Because in Africa, you find 80% of construction cost actually goes to materials and equipment. And slightly less than 20% goes into labor, into consultants and wages for workers and contractors. And that is the business side, what technology can help the businessman achieve. And then it comes to the technical side. The technical side, I think we need to decolonize the technology we inherit. And we start by looking at the standards that we apply in construction. We are confined by the British standards. Technology is made for a standard. All African countries, there's no African country I've seen that has its own standard. I did a PhD in South Africa, and the standards of cement and concrete I was referring to, I did a PhD in concrete, where European standards adopted by African SAS, South African standards. So all countries in Africa adopting standards. But the question is, many buildings in Africa are actually constructed substandard. Substandard meaning below the European standard, but these buildings continue to serve the purpose for which they are constructed. So is it a building that fails or the standard that fails? And therefore, you start looking at standards. You understand that standards are actually commerce instruments. They are not to deliver quality to consumers. They are commerce instruments designed to protect markets. And if we can understand these standards and then re-engineer them, re-innovate these standards, then we will see that yes, we are having good innovations, we support local innovations, and we start seeing local people developing own technologies that they apply for their own needs. And I think that is the point when we start achieving affordable construction, and that's
adopted. And I see the sense in it. So back to you, Francois. What I had said before Apollo had responded was, if we have, some measure of democratization in the finance sector, so we have a lot of fintech innovation that is, coming upstream, across, the world now. Why hasn't any of them been able to develop a technology-driven product that would solve this problem of mortgages in Africa?
It's a very good question. I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer on this fintech challenge. Let me just give you one example of one solution
Yes.
we are trying to develop. It's called the smartdiaspora.com. Every year there is $100 billion which of flow of money coming from Africans living in another country where they were born. That is a huge amount of money. It's much more than international aid, okay? Much, much more. How can we use part of that money to make sure it goes into investments? Because what people want to do when they live abroad is to support their home country, support their family, to build assets, so that when they go back home, they see their family are living in better living conditions. So we developed that platform where people can undertake projects, and we help them in the country where they live, from where they send the money, and in the country where they're coming from, where their family is. But it's tremendously difficult. It requires innovation in fintech. As you said, we are trying to crack the thing with some money transfer operators. It's a long journey, but that's one of the sources of funding that we hope to tap into to unlock that affordable housing market.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for telling us about that. So let's go back. One of the things that I know that each one of you has spoken about is concrete and the work that you are doing in terms of, developing, innovative, solutions around, the use of concrete for construction. My question will then be, concrete is a conventional building material, right? And it is such a huge element of the cost of construction, especially in Africa. My question then will be, there is continuous surge in the cost of construction, especially in Africa, and many people argue that traditional African construction methods, which involves the use of local materials like earth, like clay, like bamboo, like raffia, rocks, that they remain significantly superior in terms of efficiency and sustainability. And a lot of the things that we are seeing across, the construction demography now is the infusion of some of these local materials that have always been ingenious to Africa and somewhat, labeled as being, inferior. We see them, coming into mainstream construction now, and they're being used in even other countries like Europe and America and all of that. So my first question I would direct to Emmanuel is, what would you say has stifled the integration and adoption of African construction methodologies and the use of local materials in the global construction playbook? What has kept, these our local construction methodologies back for this long? And why are we seeing a little bit more of them, coming up now when people are talking about sustainability, reducing carbon emission and all of that? What do you think is happening? Did we have the answer all along and we were just playing into the European and American mold for so long? Emmanuel, we can't hear you. I think maybe your microphone is muted.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay,
I think Apollo hit this point very clearly, that it's the application of foreign standards to places which have its own strengths and technologies. And the second part of that is the innovations which are coming to fore. I'm aware of a technology which was developed through the Lafarge Foundation recently, which doesn't use cement, it uses crushed limestone, which is an ancient building material. I think the Romans used it quite effectively and created structures that are still standing today. But the use of crushed limestone in place of cement being imported, where crushed limestone, as Apollo pointed out, is a local material. These kind of innovations, the uses of fibers, microfibers for reinforcement rather than imported steel to reduce costs, but also to reduce the carbon footprint and at the same time increase durability and sustainability. I think it's a combination of those two things. And we've encountered this issue that Apollo raised in terms of standards. As our material is innovative, it's been certified by the Swedish Concrete Institute and by structural engineers in Europe. However, the codes that are applied in different countries, not all countries, stifle that kind of innovation. So it's both of those things together. I think the use of geopolymers, which I think Apollo also mentioned, and are innovations which should be brought to the market very quickly. So,
yeah, thank you. So back to you, Francois. I was reading recently about the entrenchment of construction innovation that is called the compressed earth blocks, right? Which I think is some way of some mixture of concrete with local earth to produce a more durable material that can be used for construction. And it just makes us remember the point that that Emmanuel was making about some of these readily available materials in Africa that occur locally and occur organically. Many of them, people would say, achieve better thermal comfort, aesthetics, and even sustainability. So my question to you is, such as we are seeing now with compressed earth blocks that are becoming more mainstream, which other kinds of local African material do you think we can look forward to seeing in mainstream construction? Is Lafarge also already thinking about adopting any of these or integrating any of these materials in some of the innovative research work that you people are doing, or what can we expect to see in the very mid to short term?
Yes, I think this is a difficult balance that we need to find when we try to promote some new solutions, between a balance between finding local solutions. I mean, we're using local materials and also something which is aspirational for the people. Because if you try to push a solution and that because of a local reason, people here in that specific country believe that it's not good to build with soil because it reminds them of something else, or it's something that never happened in that part of the country because they don't have any good soil pits, then it will not fly. So we need to find that balance between technology, new things, but also using local materials that are still being aspirational for those people, which is what we are trying to do. With the bricks that you mentioned, the compressed stabilizer of bricks, which are those that I showed in the presentation, we faced a challenge at the beginning, is that it had been in that country, in Malawi, for years at a small scale, but produced by people who were not following the standards, or at least following the recipe that maybe would be necessary to reach the performance that those bricks needed. Then when we arrived in Malawi and started to build our plants, we had to convince people that it's the same old technology, but with a better quality. And it took us a couple of years to do that. And now you have people who know, okay, it's called Durabrick. That's the one I want. So it's not the soil stabilizer of brick, it's Durabrick. So the brand name replaced the bad image that they have of the compressed stabilizer of bricks. This to say, it takes a lot of time and effort to show people the solution you have. They do it, they see it, they do the knock test, and then they can start to believe. But it's a journey. And again, it's about finding a local solution, but still appealing to the heart of the people who are visiting that demo house.
Yes, interesting. Thank you for that. I'm going to go straight to Apollo now. Apollo, when you were speaking the last time, you made mention of building standards as being, one of the major limiting factors in in the African build sector adopting or that are militating against the adoption of use of African materials and local technology. And I mean, I want to agree with you because there's a lot of people in these sectors, especially within the build sector in Africa, that agree with this position that the government generally has taken a position to adopt building standards that have been created for other markets apart from our own, while we berate and prohibit the use of some of our local materials and indigenous construction technology. So if you had the chance to speak to government on how to advance, the use of or the promulgation of some of our local, technology or construction technology and materials, what would you be saying to them? What steps do you think the government can take to drive research and development and ultimately local manufacture of our homegrown building materials?
Tosin, thank you. Apparently, I wouldn't go to government. I would head straight to technology, develop new technologies that provide good solutions that people can believe in, and then expect people to push government towards changing their policy standard. The challenge here is that government does not want to change what it doesn't see as broken. And therefore, when you go to government, they know that there is a big enterprise called Lafarge, which they have actually given a tax relief, which is established, paying good taxes, and you're trying to tell them that change technology, allow innovations, reduce taxes. And therefore, government is in a position where it is not able to change. It becomes worse that this government is motivated, follows education, and it's politicians, and the way politicians use education findings and research is similar to the way drunkards use street polls for support. And maybe to pee on at some point when they want to relieve. But they do not use it to rely on it to make change in policy that will help their people. So education is the first culprit. It influences government policy direction. Education influences politicians, and politicians want to communicate what they have known for a very long time. Just recently, I also teach at university, Makerere University. I gave my engineering students a simple quiz. They are supposed to sketch for me a house. And these are university students of civil engineering. And all of them gave me a sketch of a triangle seated on a box, a sketch of kindergarten, meaning that it is very hard. It's going to be very hard to change the subconscious. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. And therefore, we go back to technology, study technology as the private sector, present technology that works, that consistently will reform what is happening on the market, that it is the population, it is the masses that will see the benefit of new technologies. It's the masses that I like the idea of compressed earth, and seeing the house, how it looks, very beautiful. I would want to stay in such a house. And I mean, if you can use compressed earth and produce such high quality of accommodation, then the masses, and then it is cheap, it's affordable, the masses are going to embrace that new technology, and they'll push their politicians to change and relax on the standards and the policies which are pushed by the industrial complex. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't really know whether the masses are able to influence governments in this part of the world, but I mean, I'm just gonna stay mute on that point, just like you have, right? So, Emmanuel, let me come back to you. I want us to talk a bit about energy efficiency in building construction. I know that that is much of your forte. So in recent times, we've seen that energy efficiency has become a huge global phenomenon, especially on the back of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It is touted that the build sector accounts for about 39% of global carbon emission. And I just wanted to help us understand, how serious is this? And how do you think that Africa is responding to this global call on energy efficiency? Are we responsive? Are we even thinking about this at this point in time? What's your view?
Well, in my opinion, this issue of energy efficiency and the reduction of the carbon footprint is a matter of life and death for our planet and the inhabitants of it. How is Africa responding to it as a whole? I think it's beginning to wake up, but as Apollo has pointed out, education and making people aware of these issues is very important.
Sorry to cut you, Emmanuel. You just said to me that it's a matter of life and death, and you also said to me that Africa is not even awake. You said we are beginning to wake up.
Waking. Yes.
So are we all at risk of dying? I mean, how serious is this? I need you to let us know how serious is this?
Well, I'll have to defer to climate change experts to see what the ticking clock is telling us. It's not a matter of centuries. It's a matter of decades, perhaps. But I do want to give Africa credit for a major initiative. I think IFC EDGE program is making significant progress in making professionals and government officials aware of the desperate need to reduce energy consumption and therefore the carbon footprint. We have done that by this innovative technology, which reduces the production of concrete by about 50%. Just the windows were small, there was no proper ventilation, no proper light. And the response from the developer was, well, we can't afford to have larger openings. We can't afford to have windows that are larger. And we can't afford ceiling fans so that the dependence on air conditioning can be less. But in fact, if you sharpen your pencil and you apply the EDGE algorithms, you see that a square meter of concrete wall is probably more expensive than a square meter of window. And so you can benefit in multiple ways by reducing energy consumption, improving comfort, health, and reducing cost. It's a win-win-win. And there's so much that can be done at that scale by just informing architects, design professionals, engineers, people who are responsible for designing these structures to think of things in a different way. The same thing as I said earlier with infrastructure. Water, along with energy, is becoming a precious commodity in every place, the potable water in particular. We should be focusing on recharging our groundwater supplies, not depleting our aquifers, not using potable water for flushing toilets. We should be doing rainwater capture, which is a traditional way of doing things like infrastructure. All of these things are energy consumptive, enormous footprint. So we have to, I'm a big fan of going back to the future, using rainwater to flush toilets, using absorptive soils and geological formations to absorb water rather than concrete. There's so much that can be done and save money.
Yeah, yes, thank you. My way of summarizing what you said is Africa got it before. We lost it, and we need to go back to what we have always done. I mean, that's my own way of summarizing it, right? I'm going to ask just one last question, and I hope that you guys would be happy to answer. There's a lot of talk around concrete. My question, as a novice in this area, is it possible to even do construction without concrete? Isn't it possible? And is anybody already looking, along these lines? It is one of the major inputs in every construction project that happens in Africa, and concrete is expensive. I mean, can't we look at alternatives Francois, I think you want to go first, and then I
Yes,
just go
I go
round.
first, and my apologies. I have to leave in a few seconds because I have another meeting.
Yes.
It's for a good reason. It's because I'm moving to Africa, so I need to prepare a few things before leaving where I'm living now.
That's a good one.
But just to say, yes, I mean, let's start by reducing the quantity of concrete and use it for what we need, where we need it, because it's such a brilliant product, which is totally misused. I mean, when I built a house recently in Malawi, I think the concrete slab that we poured, following the standards, to go back to Apollo's point, I think we could host a Boeing 777 on that slab and it would still resist. But this is totally crazy. We don't need that amount of concrete. We could do much, much cheaper with much, much less concrete. So let's first optimize. Let's do that step of optimizing the use of concrete. And I think this is what also Emmanuel is doing. So let's start with this. And at the same time, let's work on alternatives. They do exist. They are still difficult to obtain on large scale with the properties we want, but it's doable. And there are people working on them. And I'm always happy to be working with them to test and take that to scale. Once again, sorry to have to leave you. Thanks for the chat and the discussion today.
Yes. The chat is buzzing with a lot of questions. I thought I would go around everyone to talk about concrete, but I think I need to just let that go so that we can take as many questions as we can within the next 10 minutes, which is when we really, really need to wrap up. So let me just run through a few of the questions. Thank you very much, Francois. Thank you so very much for joining us today. Thank you, and have a good rest of the day. So back to Emmanuel and Apollo, I'm just going to run through a few of the questions. There are a lot of questions on the 3D printing, but I'm sure that the organizers can share Francois' email so that people can reach him and ask questions along this. So I'm just going to just leave them for now. So there's a question directed at Emmanuel. It says, with reference to your in-situ production, how do you align your output to design? And how complex is in-situ production? Emmanuel, that's for you.
Yes. In-situ production is fairly straightforward. This portable concrete factory can be towed or transported very easily. It produces exactly the amount of concrete which is required. When I say concrete, it's cellular lightweight concrete, to be clear. It's a concrete made out of sand, cement, and water, and a foaming agent. The foaming agent is a substitution for the coarse aggregate that is typically used in concrete. And that foaming agent creates millions of tiny bubbles in the concrete that give it superior qualities, but also a lightweight, fast-drying material. So in many ways, what we do is fairly traditional. We have a new form of concrete. We have forms, which are technologically advanced, I would say, and we've applied very efficient systems for the process of building these structures. So in many ways, it's very traditional. We've just fine-tuned it and added a little bit of technology and efficiency to create a better product.
All right, thank you. I'm sure that the person who posted that question has got their response. We have another question. I don't know whether Apollo would attempt to answer this. It says, on the supply of non-sewered sanitation systems, is it one of the main constraints for any project? Sorry, is it that one of the main constraints for any project are the dependability of supply of water and sanitation systems to enable these housing projects to be realized? Thank you. I don't know which of you wants to attempt that, talking about non-sewered sanitation and dependability of water on the sanitation system.
I didn't understand the question, person.
Okay, I'm not sure that I do. So I don't know if you put up this question on the platform, can you just provide some clarification so that Apollo can attempt to answer it?
Well, I can speak briefly to the subject. EchoStone has a partnership with a new technology developed at Duke University. It was a project funded by the Gates Foundation to reinvent the toilet, and the Duke University innovation was awarded a prize for doing that several years ago. And what they do is, I guess, in many ways, nothing new. They use waste, solid waste and liquid waste, and extract from it materials which make it a closed cycle. In other words, using the solid waste as a source of energy, to purify the water to potable conditions, and then use the carbon coming out of the solid waste for soil additives or as a fuel for the purification process. And we have a partnership with them to apply it to a number of our projects in Africa. So that's one innovation, but the whole concept of going back in time to capture water for toilet flushing is a critical and easy thing to do.
Okay, we have another question. I think this is also directed to Emmanuel. It says, how do you deal with architectonic flexibility? What is the minimum number of building needed to depreciate one set of molds? I think this is about the eco, I think eco, is it eco concrete or eco stone?
Eco Stone is the company. Cellular lightweight concrete is the material that we apply.
Okay, yeah, so I think
startup cost, the acquisition of the forms. The forms are one of the more expensive part of our process, our system. So our system is based on building at scale, thousands of units, tens of thousands of units, not single units. But if you look at traditional construction of building a home, which takes 3 to 6 months, sometimes more, and we can build a shell for that home in 24 hours, and we can repeat it thousands of times. We can reduce the cost of the construction, but we also reduce the cost of money. So that the developer that uses our technology has a more favorable financing, can turn over money, which ultimately result in somewhere, depending on the location and the project, there are a number of variables, but it can result in somewhere between 20 and 50% reduction in the construction cost.
Right. Thank you. So I have a question for Apollo. I don't think we talked enough about technology and innovation in engineering and architecture in the course of the conversation. So I just want you to help us, understand, what kinds of things you are expecting, the kind of innovation you expect to come out of engineering. I know you talked about building information systems when you made your initial presentation. So what are the other things we can do along the lines of architecture and engineering that could, spark up some progression in sustainability and maybe even cost reduction across the African build sector?
Now, maybe I use this chance also to correct some misconception about concrete. Then I talk about technology. One, concrete is actually cheap for its strength. If you look at it from the perspective of strength it provides, concrete is a very cheap material. Two, concrete is forgiving. Anybody can make concrete and it works. It's not so for all other materials. Anybody anywhere on earth can mix concrete and cast it and it works. Other materials, you try it and it fails. Three, it's scalable. It has a lot of applications in construction, in different forms of infrastructure. You can even use concrete in building boats. Four, it's everywhere. Everywhere you go, you'll find concrete, and that's an advantage. That's an opportunity. And therefore, when we look at concrete and we are talking bad about concrete, the only problem is limestone. Limestone is the biggest problem. That as long as you add in limestone, limestone is calcium carbonate. That's where the biggest chunk of carbon dioxide comes from. And therefore, if you can make concrete without limestone, then you are making concrete very sustainable. And I think the Romans who built the Pantheon did not use the cement we have. The cement we have now is a creation of 1824. It's a recent creation. the problems started after 1824, and therefore we can have concrete sustainable. We cannot be looking away from concrete as a construction material. That answered, then how do we actually bring on board technology in construction? And the objective is to, of course, improve the incentives that push people to pick interest in construction. Number one, we look at the processes. Some of the processes are business. Like I said, why should we have a hardware shop that stores cement? To be simple, a hardware shop shouldn't store cement. In Europe, hardware shops don't store cement. It's they store high-end, high-value grouts and adhesives. You want cement, the majority of companies that construct pick cement. And therefore, when you look at the supply chain system process, you need to adapt it to meet the needs of construction. The reason we have cement in hardware shops stored badly, poorly, is because there is no information. Now with ICT tools, actually we can produce cement on demand. When you produce cement on demand, it means it moves from the factory to a construction site. Just achieving that process alone, you reduce the cost of cement by 20%. And cement is the most expensive material we have in construction in next to steel in sub-Saharan Africa. So looking at the processes, I think we have a lot of gap in innovation in processes of construction. Two, the materials alone, trying to innovate around different materials to make sure that we bring them closer to the consumers and explain to them. That is information, basically information availability, and seeing how they perform. And to achieve this, of course, you need partnership. When you look at the construction cycle system.
Apollo, I'm sorry, I'm really going to have to stop you. I'm being prompted that I need to wrap up. We have just 1 minute before we are cut off. So Let me take the last minute to thank you very specially, and to thank Emmanuel, and also to thank Francois. It's been a very interesting conversation. Thank you for making the time to be here. Thank you to all our attendees for joining the conversation. And finally, let me thank all our partners for their contribution to making this happen. We are very excited that we continue to engage and have conversations that would help to develop and drive innovation across the Africa Proptech space. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for making this happen. And I'm sure that the organizers would share the slides from some of the presentations so that people can have them. A lot of requests have gone up on the chats for that. So again, thank you everyone for making the time to be with us this afternoon, and all the very best in everything else that you do for the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Tosin.
Thank you, Tosin.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.